The blizzard was a ravenous beast, and it had hurled a man more wraith than human into the teeth of Nora's barn. The wind, a malevolent god of these forsaken plains, still shrieked its famished chorus, a wolf pack tearing at the aged timbers, though its initial 2-day onslaught was finally showing signs of abating. Even Patches, her stoic calico, was a taut ball of ginger fur and wide, anxious eyes. Through a deceptive lull, Nora had battled her way to the barn, the usually clear path already a ghost under fresh drifts. The big barn door, the one strategically facing away from the wind's prevailing fury, was ajar. A stark, foreboding slash of black against the blinding, disorienting white. This wasn't the work of the wind. It wouldn't nudge it open so. Not wolves either. This felt deliberate, chillingly so. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The cold steel of the Winchester, 44-40. A familiar, reassuring weight in her mittens. She slipped inside. The comforting, earthy musk of ancient timbers, sweet, sun-cured hay, and the residual warmth of her cattle was grotesquely overlaid with an alien, invasive scent, faint, sickly sweet, undeniably coppery. Disturbed earth still damp beneath the hay. Or was it? She inhaled sharply. Sanguineous. Unmistakably. Shafts of pale ethereal light, like probing ghostly fingers, pierced the gloom from cracks in the walls. Her cattle shifted, lowing uneasily. Then a sound that wasn't animal, a low, choked, human groan. "Who's there?" She called out, her voice sharper, more brittle than she intended. "Speak up now, or I swear to God, I'll shoot." Silence save for the storm's sighing retreat. Eyes straining, adjusting to the dim interior, she spotted him in a far, unused stall. A dark, crumpled shape, far too still. As she drew closer, rifle unwavering, the shape resolved into a man, face down in the muck, one arm flung out at an unnatural angle, the other twisted beneath him as if in agony. His clothes, rough denim, and a dark, heavily saturated shirt, were ripped, matted with grime and a deeper, ominous stain. A battered Stetson lay a few feet away, a fallen standard. Never turn away, a soul in need, daughter, her father. John's voice echoed a ghostly counsel from years past, but always know who you're inviting across your threshold. Prudence wrestled with a deeply buried compassion. "Mister," she whispered, nudging his shoulder cautiously with the toe of her boot. No response. Propping the rifle carefully against the stall, she drew her hefty hunting knife and with considerable effort rolled him onto his back. His face was a ruin, a grotesque canvas of livid contusions and dried, crusted effluence. One eye was swollen completely shut, a purpled mound. The other, a mere slit in the battered flesh, stared blankly upward. A dark, wet discoloration blossomed starkly on his chest. His breathing was shallow, a rasping, laborious effort. His left leg bent at a horrifying, unnatural angle, the jagged point of bone visibly pushing against the strained denim. Calculated, vicious brutality. As she unbuttoned his torn, stiff shirt, her cold fingers brushed something rough on his upper arm. Partially obscured by a raw, weeping abrasion was a faded, deeply scarred-over mark. A stylized, spidery H, entwined with a thorny, barren tree. Old, almost invisible under the fresh damage, yet it felt less like a symbol of allegiance and more like a mark of ownership, a brand. Redemption was a hard day's ride in good weather. Sheriff Brody now was an impossibility, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker in the man's exposed eye. He was alive. She made a swift, instinctive decision. Moving him even to a cleaner, disused stall nearby was an agonizing process for them both. She splinted his shattered leg with scavenged wood scraps and linen strips torn from an old sheet, its faded blue forget-me-nots, a strangely poignant splash of color against the grim reality of her task. He groaned deeply, a sound torn from the depths of his unconsciousness. His ribs, she suspected, were broken, perhaps several. Lacerations and abrasions crisscrossed his torso like a cruel map. She cleaned them as best she could with boiled water and pungent carbolic salve, melted snow, providing a meager source of hydration. He swallowed a definitive, encouraging sign. Before retreating to the relative safety of her cabin, she barred the main barn door from the outside, a profoundly unsettling act. The barn, once her sanctuary, now felt like a prison, or perhaps a fragile, desperate fortress. The blizzard finally broke on the third day. Her nearest neighbor, Jedediah Smith, a hard 5 miles east, was a stern, taciturn man of few words and many opinions. She told no one. The stranger remained unconscious for 2 more days, lost in a terrifying, fevered delirium, muttering horrifying, disjointed fragments. Blackwood, damn your black soul to hell. That mark seared it. Branded us like cattle, those eyes, always watching, always, sometimes shouted in raw terror, sometimes whispered in broken despair. Not her, not Sarah. God, no. They used the dogs, the hounds of Haven, run 'em down, just for sport, seen them do it, the fear in their eyes. God, the women are chattel there, bought and sold like livestock. They own the women there. The words echoed, chilling Nora to the bone. The advertisement from the Prairie Times, folded neatly, flickered in her mind's eye. Haven. A new life. Good, hard-working men seeking decent wives. Her own unsent reply, addressed hopefully to Haven, now felt like a cruel, bitter jest tucked away within the fragile pages of her mother's old hymnal. That inherited caution, perhaps a sliver of her mother's own dread, linked to some forgotten youthful heartbreak promises made in boomtowns by charlatans who vanished like smoke. Her mother's hushed, anxious whisper of a lost letter, a desperate warning from a place called Harmony Creek, a name that always cast a fleeting shadow of pain across her mother's face. A premonition Nora couldn't have grasped. Until now. On the 3rd day post-storm, his fever finally receded. His good eye fluttered open, focusing slowly. Easy now, Nora said softly, her voice gentle. You're safe. You're in my barn. Fear, raw suspicion, and excruciating pain warred in his bruised, assessing gaze. He tried to sit up, a strangled cry of agony tearing from his throat. Don't move. You're badly hurt. Where? His voice was a mere thread, barely audible. My ranch. Who did this to you? Don't know their names. Gang. Animals. Just animals. Over days punctuated by Nora's careful ministrations, he slowly regained a sliver of strength. His name, he said, was Eli. Just Eli. His good eye held a universe of weariness, lingering pain, and a flicker of hesitant, nascent gratitude. The thaw transformed the track to redemption into a treacherous quagmire. Jedediah Smith rode closer to her homestead than usual. Nora. He greeted, his voice its usual gruff timbre. Storm treat you all right then? Jedediah. Could have been worse. Stock's fine. And you? Much the same. His shrewd, assessing gaze drifted pointedly to the barn, lingering there a moment too long. I heard some commotion over this way during the worst of it. Sounded like a shot. Or maybe a man hollering. Disciplined, if you catch my meaning. Everything all right, Nora? You know some strays carry diseases. Not just sickness of the body, but the kind that can poison a whole community. Ice sharp and sudden traced a path down her spine. Wolves got bold, fired around to scare 'em off. Plausible, she hoped, but thin. Jedediah nodded slowly, his ice-chip eyes still fixed on the barn. Figured as much. Heading to redemption soon, Martha down at the general store asked after you. Mentioned you bought enough bandages last time to patch up a small field hospital, and she's got that new carbolic salve you like. Not needing more supplies for your dedicated patient work with that livestock of yours. His emphasis on patient work was unsettling, heavy with insinuation. Nora stiffened. Been meaning to. Road's still a mess. She desperately needed laudanum for Eli's unabating pain, but Martha Henderson's tongue wagged more freely than a dog's tail in a high wind, and Jedediah's probing felt far too pointed, too knowing. Well, Jedediah said, gathering his reins with deliberate slowness. You see anything unusual? You let me or Sheriff Brody know. Strange times these are. Especially for lone women, harboring things best left to the wilderness. Some dogs, my pa always said, are best left to their rightful masters, eh? And some marks, Nora, well, they signify ownership. He tipped his hat, the gesture loaded with unspoken meaning, and rode on, leaving a chill in the air. That evening, as she carefully changed Eli's dressing, "You saved my life," he said, his voice raspy but firm. Nora just shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. No, not just anyone would have. Not if they knew what I was. Before I finally saw what Silas Blackwood truly represented. They seared that H onto us, Nora. His brand, his mark of possession. Knew what Eli wasn't always a drifter on the run. Came west looking for a new start. Hired gun for a time. Eventually, I rode with Silas Blackwood. The pay was good, too good. Our job was to keep undesirables from interfering with his various enterprises. He said we were bringing order to a lawless land, that H, his personal mark, for his most trusted enforcers. I thought it meant belonging, loyalty. Now I know I sold my soul for a fistful of silver. Blackwood, the brand. Disturbing connections began to knit together in Nora's mind. Blackwood runs Haven up in Cimarron territory. Haven. Nora's blood ran cold, a sudden visceral dread. His fingers are in everything. Mining, cattle saloons, and a particular kind of trade. Eli's good eye flickered, shadowed with remembered horrors. Didn't know the full extent of it, not at first. Mostly security work. Then he needed an escort, someone discreet, to bring a woman named Sarah from Redemption to Haven. A mail-order bride, he called her. He paused, swallowing hard. Sarah, she confided in me on the journey. My father said a woman needs no books, only a husband's house. She'd whispered, clutching a worn book to her chest. But I dream of a little schoolhouse, teaching children to read. I want to teach the little ones their letters, Mr. Eli, so they can see the world beyond their own small fences. She carried a tattered McGuffey's primer, hoping against hope to reunite with her teacher brother somewhere out west. But when Blackwood greeted us, he sneered, his eyes cold and contemptuous. A woman's hands are for pleasin' a man, and rockin' a cradle not for chalk dust. The wedding was a vile sham, Nora. Eli's voice broke with raw anger. A so-called Founder's Day spectacle. Brides, dozens of them, paraded like branded cattle. The preacher was one of his gunmen. The groom assigned to Sarah a brute named Jolson. Blackwood presided over it all like some decadent Roman emperor. Sarah saw Jolson, heard his crude talk, saw Blackwood's leering, possessive gaze. "This isn't what I was promised," she cried out, her voice shaking. "The advertisement spoke of decent men churches, a new life. This feels evil." Blackwood just laughed, said the contract was signed, sealed. He grabbed her arm. She screamed. That's when I stepped in. Eli's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing in his cheek. Told him to let her go. My one unforgivable mistake. Challenging Blackwood openly. There's no coming back from that. They called me a troublemaker, a traitor, dragged Sarah screaming into Blackwood's main house. Later that week, Eli's voice hollowed, becoming a ghost of itself. I overheard some of his enforcers laughing, bragging about hunting a runaway bride with dogs for sport, they said. Blackwood made the others watch, as a lesson. That's when I truly knew the depth of his depravity. I confronted Blackwood. He just smiled, said I knew too much now, that I'd betrayed his trust, said I needed a lesson myself. They beat me until I couldn't stand, dragged me to the corrals. There was a wild stallion there, unbroken, terrified. They tied my hands, spooked the horse. Eli's voice broke, a raw sob escaping. It trampled me. My leg, my ribs, I heard them snap. Blackwood watched Nora, his face like granite, without a flicker of emotion. Then he said, "He knows too much about the brandings, about who we really hunt. Finish him." They pulled me out, dumped me miles from town, figured the storm or the coyotes would do the rest. Haven isn't a town, Nora. It's a trap. It's Blackwood's kingdom. They lure women in with false promises of marriage and security, mockery ceremonies. Some are sold off like chattel to the highest bidder. Others, Blackwood's personal favorites, are kept as his wives, terrorized into submission. They're prisoners, slaves. His good eye burned with a fierce, desperate light. The women who escape, the ones who fight back, they disappear, or they're made gruesome examples of. They hunt them, Nora. I heard Blackwood himself say, "If any more of our chattel gets ideas, you know the drill. We hunt them down, make an example." The H brand. It marked those who knew about the hunts, those sometimes expected to participate. That's why Blackwood needed me dead. I was one of his branded enforcers. He'd even sent me to retrieve a girl who had fled once. I brought her back. They branded her Nora, right in front of me, for defiance. That's what they were going to do to Sarah, or worse. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. I almost answered an advertisement. She whispered the words, sticking in her throat. For Haven. Eli stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then you understand. And you understand why they'd want me dead and buried, and anyone who helped me. A cold, hard fury rose in Nora, chilling and galvanizing. Eli wasn't just a victim. He was a vital witness. They would hunt him relentlessly. And now, because of her act of compassion, they would hunt her too. Jedediah Smith's rides by her ranch grew more frequent, his questions more probing, more pointed. "Heard you finally made it to redemption, Nora," he said one afternoon, his horse sidling restlessly. "Martha Henderson mentioned you bought a fair bit of supplies. Bandages, liniment, enough for a war wound, she reckoned. Also said Doc Peabody over in Flat Rock's been treating some mysterious gunshot wounds lately. Fellow who came through mentioned a nasty scuffle up Cimarron Way. Anyone visiting you? Nora, someone needing to lie low, perhaps." Nora's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Bad tangle with barbed wire. Best yearling. Nasty gash that got infected. Ash and deceit filled her mouth. Jedediah's eyes narrowed, his gaze sharp as flint. Right. Barbed wire can be wicked mean. Always pays to know what you're fencing in, or what you might be fencing out. Take care, Nora. A woman alone has to be mighty careful who she trusts or who she helps. Some troubles, they stick like tar, and some carry a brand best left untouched. This ain't your fight, Nora. Some fires are best left to burn themselves out. He rode off, the threat palpable, hanging heavy in the air. He knows. Eli said grimly later that evening, his face pale. Or he suspects enough to be dangerous. He's one of them. Blackwood's eyes and ears out here. What are we going to do? Nora paced the small cabin, the space suddenly feeling claustrophobic. They'll find you. They'll find us both. Turn me in, Nora. Eli said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Tell Sheriff Brody everything. It's your only clean way out of this. Nora saw not surrender, but a spark of hard-won defiance in his eye. No. Then run, Nora. Oregon, California. Anywhere far from here. You don't owe me anything. Abandon her ranch, her home, her father's legacy. No, I'm not running. Her voice was steely edged with a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. We're going to fight them, Eli. Disbelief, then a profound fear for her, flickered in Eli's eye. Fight Nora? Are you mad? Blackwood has an army of ruthless men. They think we're weak. Women to be treated as prizes, as property. A broken man no longer a threat. A lone woman an easy mark. They are fatally wrong. She paced with a newfound grim purpose. Blackwood keeps records, doesn't he? A ledger of his transactions? Eli nodded slowly, a flicker of grim purpose kindling in his own gaze. Yes. In the town hall, a big leather-bound book. He tracks all of their inventory. Dates, names, prices, paid origins. From a shadowed stall in the barn, where Nora had quietly moved another soul Eli had miraculously guided, partway from the hell of Haven, a soft whimper emerged. Martha, a young woman, whose spirit had been almost extinguished, clutched her small daughter Lucy tightly. My husband James. Before Haven. He worked with ledgers for a mercantile. Martha whispered, her voice barely audible. He always said they'd tell the unvarnished truth, the things people try to hide. This place is evil incarnate. My younger sister Annie, she dreamt of roses. He promised her a garden, a good life. He gave her a ledger entry, called it a marriage registry. It was a slave ledger. Said her husband came from a network, places like Harmony Creek. My own mother, God rest her, always said the name Harmony Creek gave her shivers. Our cousin Eliza wrote fearful letters from there, just before she vanished. Isn't that near where your mother came from, Miss Nora? Nora froze, a cold dread gripping her heart. Her mother's unspoken fears, the story of the lost letter from Harmony Creek. Eliza, her mother's name. A devastating connection spanning years, possibly generations. Then that ledger is our first target. Destroy it, and we throw their entire vile operation into chaos. And Sarah, Lucy, dear. Did your mama say anything about where they might keep other women, the ones like Sarah? Lucy, pale and small, trembled but spoke up. Mama said, Mr. Blackwood had a special bad place, dark and cold, like a smokehouse, but for people. We try to free who we can. Nora said, her voice thick with emotion. We can hurt Blackwood, expose him for the monster he is, make him bleed. And if we can find this Harmony Creek connection. Her own mother, ensnared in a similar web years ago, fresh potent fury surged through her. They almost got you, Nora. Eli said quietly, his gaze fixed on her face. Yes, and now by God they're going to pay. For Sarah, for Martha and Lucy and Annie, for you, Eli, for my mother, Eliza, and for every single soul they've marked and treated as property. Nora prepared. Her Winchester, her father's old Greener shotgun, the Colt Peacemaker .45 she always carried. Ammunition, lamp oil, empty whiskey bottles, rags for Molotov cocktails. Eli, still weak but resolute, meticulously taught her firearm maintenance until she could field strip the Colt by touch alone, humming Sweet Betsy from Pike under her breath to calm her fraying nerves. He sharpened her hunting knife to a razor's edge. Town Hall. Eli sketched a crude map of Haven on the dirt floor of the cabin. Usually guarded by a couple of drunks. Blackwood's house, that's the fortress. His loyal, vicious inner circle are always there. Lucy, remembering, added a detail. The really bad men, the ones who laughed all the time, played cards in the saloon part of Mr. Blackwood's big house. They were always loud and so cruel. We'll need a significant diversion, Nora said, studying the crude map intently. The main stables, Eli suggested immediately. Blackwood values his horseflesh almost as much as his gold, and they're highly flammable. Nora's last trip to redemption was a carefully calculated risk. More ammunition. Varmint control problems are worsening. She'd told a curious Martha Henderson, extra lamp fuel, dark mannish clothes, rough chores ahead preparing for winter. Martha Henderson at the general store had smirked knowingly. Heard tell some of those radical California women are wearing trousers these days. Times are certainly changing, Nora. Or are you expecting to do a man's job, or perhaps fight a man's fight? Doc Peabody was in earlier, by the way. Bought up a good supply of laudanum. Said a fellow came through needing stitches from a nasty disagreement up north. Happened to mention Blackwood's name in passing. Nora's smile was tight, a mere grimace. A woman does what she must, Martha. Martha's keen interest in Blackwood and her probing questions about supplies suddenly felt less like idle gossip and more like information gathering. Exiting town's Jedediah Smith seemed to be lingering intentionally by the trail. Stocking up heavy, Nora, expecting a long, hard winter, or perhaps company that eats a lot and, say, bleeds a bit. His eyes held a cold, chilling certainty. Always best to be prepared, Jedediah. For anything. That I do. Some changes are for the better. Some, well, they ain't. Meddling folk often find unwelcome changes come faster and harder than they bargained for. Mr. Blackwood doesn't tolerate interference in his affairs. Remember that, Nora. The threat was unmistakable, a cold promise. He knew, or Sal had told him, what Martha Henderson had relayed. The night of their desperate gambit was moonless, starless, the sky a vast, oppressive blanket of black. Eli, his legs still splinted and throbbing, insisted he could ride. Nora helped him onto Shadow, her steadiest, most reliable horse. Eli's face was ashen in the faint starlight, his one good eye gleaming with a mixture of resolve and fear. Nora, clad in the dark, practical clothes, swung onto Bess, her swift, nimble mare. Martha and Lucy were hidden securely in the reinforced root cellar beneath the cabin, supplied with food, water, and strict instructions to remain there no matter what they heard. Lucy, before Nora closed the heavy cellar door, pressed a smooth riverstone into Nora's hand. For luck, Miss Nora. Mama says you're an angel sent to help us. I'm going to write a book about you someday so everyone knows that women can be heroes too. Ready? Nora whispered her voice, barely carrying over the chirping crickets. Eli glanced one last time at her small, vulnerable cabin. As I'll ever be. Let's pay Mr. Silas Blackwood a long overdue visit. They rode south, avoiding the main track. Near the dismal outskirts of Haven, they tethered their horses in a dense thicket of cottonwoods. Town Hall is there. Eli pointed, his voice a low murmur. Blackwood's house is beyond it on that slight rise. And Sarah, is she likely to be in his house? Eli shook his head, his expression grim. More likely in one of the back rooms or an outbuilding, like that smokehouse Lucy mentioned. He keeps his special collection separate under tighter guard. All right. I'll go for Blackwood's house and check that smokehouse first. Look for Sarah, anyone else I can find. You the stables. Make it a big fire, Eli. A fire they can't ignore. Then the town hall. Get that ledger. Burn it to ashes. And don't try to be a hero. Eli's good eye was filled with a mixture of fear, resolve, and a deep concern for her. You be careful, Nora. Blackwood's a venomous snake. His men are vipers. If he offers you a deal, don't take it. His promises are pure poison. He even tried to make me think you were setting some kind of trap for me when you first found me. You too, Eli. A brief, firm clasp of his forearm, a silent acknowledgement of the danger they both faced. He melted into the darkness, heading towards the stables. Nora took a longer, more circuitous path towards Blackwood's heavily guarded house. A flicker, then a whoosh, and suddenly the night sky to the east was painted with an angry, orange glow. Fire, fire at the stables. The shouts erupted just as Nora reached the dark alleyway, running alongside Blackwood's sprawling house. Figures ran their voices, carrying on the night air filled with alarm. Perfect. Blackwood's house loomed before her, a dark, menacing silhouette. A feeble lamp glowed in a downstairs window. As she slipped past, she heard a low chuckle. Then Blackwood's voice, chillingly calm, cutting through the rising din. Let the damned stables burn. The prize stock was moved out days ago. Jolson secure our other valuable assets. Check the smokehouse first. Make damn sure our little songbird hasn't flown the coop. He knew, or he suspected far more than a simple accidental fire. Jolson. The brute Eli had described Sarah's tormentor. Her eyes found the smokehouse, a squat, heavily log-built structure, windowless, with a thick, heavy iron bar securing the door. Just as she was contemplating her approach, a new sound reached her, the crunch of boots on gravel. Footsteps approaching. From the main house, a bulky silhouette detached itself and moved purposefully towards the smokehouse. Jolson. Nora flattened herself against the rough wall of the main building, Colt, 45, drawn and ready. Before he could reach the iron bar, she stepped out from the shadows. Looking for me, Jolson? He whirled raw animalistic rage, twisting his coarse features, and lunged without a word. Nora fired low, aiming for his leg. The shot thundered in the confined space. He bellowed in pain and surprise, stumbling. She didn't hesitate, bringing the heavy barrel of the Colt down hard on his temple. He collapsed like a felled ox. Inside the smokehouse, a muffled whimper. She strained, lifting the heavy iron bar, and pulled the rough-hewn door open. Pitch blackness and a fetid, cloying stench assaulted her. A match flared, briefly illuminating two women huddled together on a thin layer of dirty straw, their eyes wide and wild with terror. The younger one, her face streaked with tears and grime, was unmistakably Sarah. I'm here to help, Nora whispered urgently. Eli's out there. The fire at the stables, that's your chance. Can you run? The older woman, who Nora now recognized as Martha from the barn, croaked. Eli, he's alive, Blackwood. He showed us a bloodied shirt, said Eli betrayed him, paid the price with his life. Lucy, small and fierce, suddenly piped up from behind her mother. Mr. Blackwood is a wicked liar. Eli shared his jerky with me on the way here. Good. Nora said, a wave of relief washing over her. Eli's fighting. Follow me. Be quiet and fast. She led them out into the chaotic night. The stables were now a raging inferno, casting a hellish glow over everything. And then a new, fiercer illumination erupted from the center of town, the town hall. Eli. He'd done it. Get to the horses, Nora told Martha and Lucy, pointing west toward the cottonwoods. Eli will meet you there. Tell him Nora sent Martha and Lucy. Lucy clutched at her arm, her small face pale. Aren't you coming with us, Miss Nora? Sarah looked at Nora, hope and terror warring in her eyes. He keeps others. In the cellar of his main house. His special collection, he calls them. I will come. But I have one more thing I need to do. Now go, be careful. Martha nodded, her face set with determination, took Lucy's hand, and with Sarah trailing closely, they vanished into the shadows. Nora turned back, her gaze fixed on Blackwood's private hell. The cellar door was in a shadowy alcove, secured with a rust-pitted padlock. She smashed it with the butt of her Colt. Steep, narrow stairs led down into a cloying, impenetrable darkness. The air was thick with the smells of damp earth, stale wine, unwashed bodies, and palpable despair. A floorboard creaked ominously above her, the distinct metallic click of a rifle hammer being cocked. She froze in the deeper shadows beneath the stairs. Footsteps passed directly overhead, paused, and then receded. Holding her breath, she descended. Suddenly, a burly figure lunged from the inky blackness. At the bottom of the stairs, a glint of steel in his hand. Nora dropped instinctively, driving her shoulder hard into his midriff. He grunted the air, expelling from his lungs. The Colt butt connected sharply with his temple. He crumpled without another sound. In a dark, fetid corner, she found another young woman, bound and gagged, rocking back and forth, her eyes wide and vacant with terror. Nora quickly sliced her bonds. You're safe now. Stay hidden here. I'll be back for you. At the far end of a narrow corridor, a single sputtering lantern cast long, dancing shadows. Rough wooden doors lined one side. Behind the third door, she heard a low, rhythmic creak. A woman's soft cry of pain abruptly cut off. Then Blackwood's voice laced with cruel amusement. Your defiance is rather invigorating, my dear Sarah. But ultimately, it is futile. Sarah, not the Sarah, but another woman he taunted with the name Nora, didn't hesitate. She kicked hard just beside the latch. Wood splintered, again with all her force. The door burst inward. The room was small, windowless, lit by a single foul-smelling tallow candle. On a soiled, narrow cot lay a young woman, not the Sarah she knew, but pale, horrifically bruised, her simple chemise torn. Silas Blackwood stood over her, casually buckling his gun belt. He turned as Nora burst in. Colt leveled raw fury, twisting his handsome, cruel face. On a rickety table nearby, a leather valise lay slightly ajar. Spilling from it were letters, small ledgers, and a brittle folded yellowed piece of paper. The spidery script, the familiar texture, the aged distinct shade of the paper. It was unmistakably her mother's handwriting. The lost letter from Harmony Creek. Who in the goddamned hell are you? Blackwood snarled his hand, dropping instinctively towards the pearl-handled revolver at his hip. The light from the single tallow candle flickered, casting grotesque, dancing shadows on the damp stone walls. Blackwood's face, contorted with rage, seemed demonic in the wavering light. The air was thick, suffocating, reeking of cheap tallow, stale sweat, and something else. The metallic tang of fear, and under it, the faint, cloying sweetness of old bloodstains on the floor. Nora could hear her own ragged breathing, the thundering of her heart, the soft, terrified whimpers of the girl on the cot. Someone who doesn't appreciate men who prey on women. Nora's voice was low, dangerously steady. And her name isn't Sarah, is it? The girl on the cot whispered a fragile thread of sound. Please, please help me. He's not killing anyone else tonight. Nora said, her gaze locked with Blackwood's. The Colt felt like an extension of her arm, cold solid. Get away from her. And if you even look at that other girl I've found. Blackwood's eyes, cold and calculating, flickered for a fraction of a second to a spot on the floor just in front of Nora. Then the floor beneath her simply gave way. Trap door. She plunged downwards, her leg twisting violently under her, the Colt, .45 flying from her grasp. A blinding, searing agony shot through her ankle. Blackwood laughed a harsh, triumphant sound. Predictable did that sentimental fool Eli find another one to champion. She landed hard in the dirt of a shallow pit, stars exploding behind her eyes. Scrambling desperately in the sudden darkness, ignoring the screaming protest from her ankle, her fingers brushed against the cold steel of the Colt. Blackwood peered down from the opening above his face, a mask of sneering contempt. He started to turn, reaching for the terrified girl on the cot. Nora, adrenaline surging, fired blindly upwards. The shot was wild, but it made him jump back, cursing. Painfully, she clawed her way out of the pit, her injured ankle threatening to buckle. She rose Colt steady despite the tremor in her hand, mud and filth clinging to her. Just then, a stray bullet from the chaos outside smashed through the thin wall near her head splinters, flying like angry wasps. A new searing torment erupted in her left shoulder. Dark crimson bloomed on her sleeve. Her arm went momentarily numb. Blackwood laughed again, a harsh, mirthless bark. "I'll waltz into my town, invade my house, barge into my private cellar, giving orders, and now you're wounded. You've got spirit, girl. More than these whimpering fools I usually deal with. Did that branded cur Eli send you? I should have made absolutely certain he was buzzard bait. Eli? Always such a profound disappointment. Sentimentality a fatal flaw in any man." He paused his voice, turning slick, persuasive. "Tell you what, girl, you're strong. Haven could use a queen. Someone with backbone. Put the gun down. Walk out of here with me. You can have power, riches, anything you desire. It's a damn sight better than a dirt-poor ranch and a disgraced, broken-down trader. Just leave the girls. They're damaged goods anyway." He licked his lips, a predatory gesture. "The other one. The quiet one you found. Barely even whimpers anymore. Quite thoroughly broken in." His hand, a blur of motion, darted towards his gun. Nora fired. The roar of the Colt was deafening in the confined space. Blackwood grunted a sound of pure shock and agony, stumbling back his hand, reflexively clutching his other shoulder. Her aim, though hurried and hampered by her own wounds, had been true enough to target his gun hand. A dark stain rapidly blossomed on his shirt. "That," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and adrenaline, "was for Eli. The man you branded like an animal, tortured and left for dead. The man you called a traitor merely for growing a conscience." Blackwood stared at her raw fury contorting his handsome features. "Eli, that worthless, sentimental cur, he's alive. He sent you. He told you. Everything." His good hand, quick as a striking snake, snatched the terrified girl from the cot, yanking her in front of him as a human shield. "Drop the gun, bitch, or she dies. He is alive," Nora said, her voice gaining strength from her cold fury. "And he remembers everything, every atrocity, every girl. He even told me about Harmony Creek." She nodded towards the valise on the table. "That letter in there, it's in my mother's handwriting. You preyed on women like Eliza, my mother, years ago, didn't you? This whole rotten enterprise of yours goes back that far." Fueled by a white-hot protective rage, she risked a quick lunge, snatched the yellowed letter from the valise. A devastating glance confirmed its contents, a desperate, detailed warning from her mother Eliza about a predatory network operating out of Harmony Creek, sickeningly identical in its methods to Haven, a letter clearly intercepted before it could reach its intended recipient. On the back, a tiny, almost invisible sketch, a map marker, a symbol. "Let her go, Blackwood." "Where are the others?" Blackwood sneered, his face pale with pain and rage. "There are no others here. She's the only one left in this particular establishment, besides the quiet one in the corner." He was lying, she knew it. The shouts and alarm bells from outside were growing louder, closer, the glow of flames reflected in the grimy window pane. This was her chance. She fired past his head. The girl screamed instinctively, dropping to the floor. Blackwood, startled by the near miss, loosened his grip for a fraction of a second. Nora lunged, ignoring the agony in her ankle and shoulder, and grabbed the girl. Out! Fast! She backed cautiously towards the door, her Colt still trained on Blackwood, who was now pale and sweating heavily. Don't even think about following. The next one won't be in your shoulder. She pulled the terrified girl out of the room, the other silent, traumatized girl following close behind, like a shadow. They stumbled to the top of the stairs, emerging into smoky, chaotic mayhem. A figure loomed out of the swirling smoke. Eli, leaning heavily on his rifle, pale and soot-streaked, but blessedly miraculously there. Nora, you're hit. It's just a scratch. The records, the town hall ledger. Ashes. Eli said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. The whole tinderbox went up. Their guards weren't as drunk or as stupid as we hoped. I had to persuade one of them. They're coming, Nora. Half the town, and they're madder than a nest of disturbed hornets. A hellish, pulsating glow emanated from the direction of the now fiercely burning town hall. Yells, the angry barking of dogs, all dangerously close. Suddenly, fat raindrops began to splatter quickly, escalating into a torrential downpour. The horses! Nora shouted above the rising wind and the crackle of flames. The storm, it'll cover our escape. They half ran, half stumbled through the mud and chaos, Nora supporting the two rescued girls, Eli limping badly but keeping pace. The rain lashed down, turning the ground to slick mud thunder cracking like celestial artillery. They reached the cottonwoods. Martha, Lucy, and Sarah were there, terrified but safe. Get them up! Nora yelled, her voice hoarse. She helped the newest, most traumatized girl onto Bess. Sarah, displaying surprising strength, managed to mount with Lucy. The silent girl was helped up behind Nora. Eli, with a grunt of pain, hauled himself onto Shadow. Martha helped Lucy and Sarah onto the spare horse. Which way? Eli yelled over the roar of the storm. South, straight through the ridges. They won't dare follow far in this. They plunged into the howling darkness. Behind them they could hear faint shouts, see the bobbing, uncertain lights of lanterns. The narrow canyon trails quickly became raging torrents. They came to a rickety wooden bridge spanning a dangerously swollen creek. Rifle shots whined off the rocks around them. The bridge groaned ominously under their weight. Bess, doubly burdened and with a fresh graze on her flank from a ricocheting bullet, screamed in fear and stumbled. They were halfway across when the main timbers cracked with a sickening sound. It's going, Eli yelled. The last horse, Eli's, barely cleared the far side as the supports gave way, the bridge collapsing with a roar into the churning water below. Their spare pack horse, with some of their meager supplies, was lost. They rounded a blind bend and ran almost directly into a large wolf-like hound, one of Blackwood's infamous trackers. It lunged, baying ferociously at Martha's horse. Lucy screamed in terror. The horse shied violently. Nora twisted awkwardly in her saddle, aimed her Colt by sheer instinct, and fired. The hound yelped once, a high, thin sound, and tumbled away into the darkness. That was Blackwood's damn favorite tracker. Eli grunted, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. Then disaster. Lanterns ahead, lanterns behind. They were caught in a pincer. A harsh voice cut through the storm. This way, spread out, Blackwood wants the women alive. But the tall one, she's fair game, Smith. You cut 'em off at Red Creek Pass. No survivors if they resist, Jedediah Smith. Another bullet grazed Bess's flank. The mare screamed again, nearly going down. Nora fought to control her. Jedediah, you treacherous bastard! Eli roared into the storm. Now you pay for your meddling, Nora. Jedediah hollered back, his voice filled with malice. This way. Nora screamed, pointing desperately to a nearly vertical game trail leading up a muddy scree slope. They scrambled upwards, hooves slipping dislodged stones, clattering loudly into the darkness below. A fusillade of shots followed them from below, bullets thudding into the mud around them. They reached a narrow, precarious ledge. Jedediah's cursing voice sounded alarmingly close from below. They're cornered. Spread out, men, I can see your tracks, Nora. They huddled together in a shallow rock fissure hidden from below. Torches swept across the cliff face inches from their hiding place. Then, a monstrous, deep, rumbling sound. The entire rain-soaked hillside where Jedediah's men were advancing seemed to sigh, then give way with a sickening lurch. Mud, rocks, and uprooted trees cascaded downwards, obliterating the trail below. Horrified, abruptly silenced screams were swallowed by the roar of the landslide. That stops them for now. Eli panted, his face grim. In their makeshift cave, Lucy, her teeth chattering uncontrollably bravely, offered her small canteen of water first to the silent girl, then to Sarah, then to her mother. Dawn broke gray and weeping the rain, finally lessening to a drizzle. They emerged exhausted, soaked to the bone, caked in mud, but miraculously alive. Nora's shoulder throbbed mercilessly. Eli's leg was grotesquely swollen streaks of red, indicating a raging infection. They found a slightly deeper, drier, shallow cave. Sarah, Martha, Lucy, and the silent girl huddled together, a nascent, fragile hope beginning to flicker in their haunted eyes. Lucy, ever observant, whispered to Nora, "Are you truly an angel, Miss Nora, Mama? Always said angels fight monsters. You're like one of those brave lady knights in the stories." Nora managed a weary, faint smile. Late that afternoon, they stumbled into the small settlement of Flat Rock. Doc Peabody met them, his eyes showing. Something Nora couldn't quite decipher. He tended to Eli's leg first. "Shouldn't have moved on this, son. Then again, looks like you didn't have much choice, eh?" He administered laudanum and applied a fresh salve. He then tended to Nora's bleeding shoulder wound. He noted the silent girl's catatonic state with a sigh. Another one broken by this harsh, unforgiving land. Martha, her voice trembling, asked, "Doctor, have you heard any word? Of children? 2 little girls, Annie's daughters, taken by bad men some months back." Peabody shook his head slowly. "Sorry, ma'am. This territory sees far too much sorrow. There are good folks trying to help, though. You all should rest here. Fort Grant's a hard, long ride from here." Nora bought stew bread and coffee from the small eatery. As they ate, Lucy whispered urgently to Nora, "Doc Peabody." He kept looking at Mr. Eli's brand, and he asked Mama if Mr. Blackwood was a rich man. Then I saw him talking real quiet to a rough-looking man who rode in just after us. He gave the man a jingling pouch. Nora's blood ran cold. Jedediah, Martha Henderson and her innocent gossip back in Redemption. Now Doc Peabody, Sal the burly, seemingly helpful cafe owner in Redemption. Her questions about Blackwood, her persistent inquiries about Nora's supply purchases, had suddenly become far too specific, too pointedly interested in retrospect. It hadn't been just idle town gossip. It was intelligence gathering. "We leave? Now," Nora said, her voice low and urgent. "We make for Fort Grant. Marshal Davies needs to hear all of this. We can't trust anyone here." Eli looked sharply at her, understanding dawning in his eye. "You think Peabody?" "I think Haven's poisonous reach is far longer and deeper than we ever imagined." As they were preparing to slip out under the cover of the deepening twilight, Doc Peabody appeared in the doorway of the room they'd been given, no longer kindly or avuncular. Two armed, hard-faced men stood behind him. "Leaving so soon, Miss Nora. I'm afraid I must insist you and your companions stay. Mr. Blackwood offers a rather generous reward for the return of his property, and for those who meddle in his affairs." Betrayal sharp and bitter. Trapped. But Eli, anticipating trouble, already had his rifle in hand. Nora drew her Colt, the movement fluid, and practiced. "You won't take us, Peabody. Not alive." Suddenly, Sal, the surprisingly burly cafe owner from Redemption, stepped from the deep shadows of the livery stable across the dusty street, a double-barreled shotgun leveled not at Peabody, but directly at Nora. Her face was cold, devoid of any emotion, save for a kind of detached businesslike cruelty. "Drop your weapons, Nora. Both of you. Mr. Blackwood pays considerably better than thirsty drifters and runaway chattel." Two more of Sal's rough-looking associates emerged from the alleyway beside the general store, effectively cutting off their only escape route. This was the true betrayal, deeper and more venomous than Peabody's craven greed. Sal had been Blackwood's chief eyes and ears in Redemption, all along a linchpin in his far-reaching network. Her feigned friendliness and helpfulness, a cruel, carefully calculated deception. Peabody was merely her well-paid puppet in Flat Rock. "You treacherous bitch." Nora spat pure, undiluted venom in her voice. "Just business, dearie." Sal sneered, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "A smart woman always looks out for number one. You should have learned that lesson out here on the prairie by now." Then from the darkened doorway of the general store, another shotgun blast roared, echoing through the small town. Not at them, but at one of Sal's men, who yelped in pain and went down clutching his leg. The actual cafe owner in Flat Rock, a wiry, determined-looking woman named Bessie, whom Nora had bought coffee from, stood resolutely with several armed townsfolk. "Peabody, Sal. You low-life scum," Bessie shouted. "These folks are under my protection now. I had a feeling Blackwood's stink reached this far south. Get out of Flat Rock now before we fill you full of buckshot." Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Sal Peabody and their remaining men slowly backed down, snarling curses, dragging their wounded comrade with them. Sal gave Nora a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "This ain't over, rancher. Not by a long shot." Bessie grinned a fierce, toothy expression. "Now get before we change our minds and decide to decorate the landscape with you." They rode out later that night with a small armed escort led by Bessie, who saw them safely past the immediate reach of Peabody's and Sal's vengeful associates. Fort Grant. Marshal Clayton Davies was a tall, clear-eyed man who listened intently, his face growing grimmer with each horrifying detail. Eli recounted Blackwood's brutal reign, his own reluctant complicity, the brandings, the barbaric hunts. Sarah, her voice gaining strength with every word, told of stolen dreams of being promised haven, but delivered to hell. My simple desire for a small schoolhouse dismissed as a foolish woman's fancy. My brother will be so ashamed of what I allowed myself to believe. Martha, tears choking her voice, spoke of her sister Annie, of abducted children, and the insidious Harmony Creek network that Nora's mother's letter had warned about. Nora presented the faded, yellowed letter, its crude sketch of a symbol. "My mother, Eliza, wrote of such a mark. She said it was a symbol for escape routes for safe houses." Lucy, small but brave, pointed to a fading discoloration on her arm. "Mr. Jolson did that to me 'cause Mama wouldn't smile for him." The silent girl, whose name they'd learned was Lily, only keened softly a sound more heartbreaking than any words. Davies slammed his fist on his desk. "This outrage will not stand, not in my territory." He immediately began to assemble a posse comprised of soldiers and trusted civilian trackers. Statements were meticulously taken. "This Eliza. She sounds like a brave woman, Miss Nora. The symbol you found, it's likely for an underground network escape routes for women fleeing abusive situations. Your mother was a fighter, it seems." He looked at Nora with respect. "What you did, ma'am, was a profoundly brave thing. All of you women." Nora recounted Jedediah's treachery, Peabody's cowardly betrayal, and now Sal's crucial venomous role as a key operative in Blackwood's network. Davy's jaw tightened. Smith, Peabody, and Sal from Redemption. We'll find those treacherous bastards. Every last one of them. The waiting was torture. Then word arrived Davies was returning. With many prisoners. Haven, it turned out, was even more depraved than they had imagined. Blackwood, his wounded shoulders festering, his arrogant demeanor shattered, was brought in chains. Jolson limping heavily, the bogus preacher, Haven's corrupt paid-off sheriff. Jedediah Smith, mud-caked and with several broken bones from the landslide, was also shackled. Peabody and Sal were caught trying to flee south towards the Mexican border. As word spread, more women from Haven and the surrounding areas came forward, their voices joining in a chorus of abuse and exploitation. Charred fragments of the main ledger, Blackwood's personal valise, incriminating documents found in Jolson's pockets, and Blackwood's own detailed correspondence regarding the Harmony Creek operation implicated numerous other figures far beyond Haven. The small, seemingly insignificant sketch on Eliza's recovered letter, when shown to one of the more senior captured enforcers under duress, led to the discovery of a hidden compartment in Blackwood's office. A secondary, far more detailed ledger of his entire nefarious network, including names, dates, and payoffs. Haven as a criminal enterprise was finished. A public trial was convened swiftly at Fort Grant. Blackwood, Jolson, Jedediah, Peabody, Sal, and their key associates faced a jury of stern-faced settlers and grimly determined soldiers. One by one, Nora, Eli, Sarah, Martha, and several other newly freed women testified. Their words, raw, unfiltered, and powerful, painted a damning, undeniable portrait of Haven's systemic horrors. Eliza's intercepted letter, detailing the methods of the Harmony Creek network and Blackwood's clear connection to it, became a pivotal piece of evidence demonstrating the long-standing, organized nature of his depravity. The verdict was swift guilty on all counts. The sentences were harsh and unequivocal: death by hanging for Blackwood and his most violent lieutenants, including Sal, whose cold-blooded, calculated betrayal of trust drew particular condemnation from the jury and the assembled crowd. Justice, stark, final, and deeply resonant, was served under the wide prairie sky. Eli's leg would eventually heal, though he would always walk with a limp. He chose to stay on at Fort Grant, assisting Marshal Davies in tracking down the more remote branches of Blackwood's network. One cool evening, he found Nora standing by the fort wall, gazing out at the vast expanse of the plains. He pressed a small, intricately carved wooden prairie rose into her hand. "Nora," he began hesitantly, "that ranch of yours. Reckon there might be room for another hand, one who knows a bit about rebuilding shattered lives and maybe planting new seeds." A shy, hopeful smile touched his lips. Nora felt a warmth spread through her, unexpected and welcome. "A rose needs strong roots to flourish, Eli. Perhaps we could plant one together come spring." Sarah's aunt, located through Marshal Davies's efforts, took her in, promising to help her find her long-lost brother. Martha, her voice now steady and filled with purpose, began organizing aid and support for the other freed women. Lucy, adopted by a kind-hearted quartermaster, and his wife learned her letters with a fierce, unbridled joy. Before leaving Fort Grant, Sarah hugged Nora tightly, pressing an exquisitely embroidered handkerchief, depicting a single perfect prairie rose, into her hand. "You gave me back my life, Nora. You gave me back my dream. The silent girl, Lily, slowly found a measure of peace tending the small garden at the fort, and later found a permanent, gentle home with a Quaker family who understood that some wounds ran too deep for words. Nora prepared to return to her ranch. She sold the Devil's Backbone, the parcel of land that had been her father's unfulfilled dream. She anonymously sent the proceeds to Marshall Davies with a note, "For the women, to start a new network to fund safe passage west, a beacon of hope, perhaps following the map my mother Eliza tried so desperately to create." Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "This land asks for everything you have, but sometimes it gives back truth." Back in her own small cabin, Eliza's well-worn Bible rested on the mantelpiece, the recovered precious letter safely tucked within its pages. It had finally found its way home. With her sharp hunting knife, she carefully carved a small E and the unique map symbol from her mother's letter onto one of the main barn posts, a quiet tribute. Patches purred contentedly on her lap. The familiar rhythms of the prairie began to reassert themselves. But Nora had been irrevocably changed. She found the Haven advertisement still tucked in her mother's hymnal and watched it burn to ash in her stove. In helping Eli and facing down Blackwood, she had found a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The prairie had forged her anew, tempered her like fine steel, and opened a heart that now bled with fierce compassion for others. The barn door still creaked in the wind, but now the heavy bolts slid home with a sense of deep, hard-earned peace. One crisp autumn morning, she saw a wagon train far out on the Redemption Road, heading west. A bright blue flag flew proudly from the lead wagon. On it, a defiantly stitched prairie rose. A young girl about Lucy's age shaded her eyes against the sun, saw Nora watching from her porch, and waved enthusiastically, a McGuffey's primer clutched in her hand. Tucked inside that primer, Nora imagined was a note perhaps saying, "For Miss Nora, with eternal thanks from Sarah's first little school. We follow the new roses west towards hope." Her horizons had irrevocably expanded beyond her fences. She was a guardian now, forever watchful. Her legacy would not just be one of survival, but of fierce, unyielding compassion and an unbreakable will forged in the crucible of the wild, wild West.